Okay, I got an email about this product that I'd never heard of, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll see why I thought, actually, yeah, that could be a really useful. This is the KM Machines Endgame Duality Calibrator. A tiny little box that can do an awful lot of stuff and might have a place in your rig. Let's dig into it.
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
This thing has many uses. In this video I'm going to try and show you a couple of them. You'll see here it says doubler. This is a doubling effect. We've got an effects loop, but you can also see we've got cabs over on this side. We've got our double tracking width. We've got an aux mix. We've got ambience. Look at the amount of connections we've got on this side. We've got fully balanced out, dual headphone out, we've got TRS line outs. We've also got on this side our inputs, where you can see you've got a stereo effects loop and input and through, power amp mode. So an awful lot of stuff. What is it for? Well, essentially the idea of this is that it goes at the end of your rig. So my first use that I kind of thought that would be interesting for that was as a kind of small IR type loading device. As you see, this is my first time turning it on. I've got the guitar going into the amp over in the corner. Then the amp goes into the load box, comes back in via this here, and then you're hearing via these two TRS outputs. No cab, V30. Greenback. volume back. Two user slots. I could load my own. Okay, then we could use this doubling. We've got this ambient setting here as well, so let's start to spring reverb from the amp, but as well this ambience. So kind of adding some room sound. You've also got a power amp setting here, which would make more sense in a different context than this. So if you were using like a preamp pedal in. Okay, so now things are starting to get a little bit more complex. So we've got an Eventide H90 here, stereo effects loop here, and essentially that's going into here and back in. And so without the effects loop engaged, this is like a dry switch. Engage it. So it's actually a bit of a game changer in many ways. So I could take this along to a gig. Along with my load box, and be fairly confident that I'd be getting some really good tones to the front of house. The amp doesn't even need to be making any noise to be getting, it's like set to 8 on the amplifier itself, but set into here. could kick the doubler on. So I'm already trying to think about how I'm going to integrate this into my rig, so I need to think about this a little bit more. But instantly, I know on Friday I've got a gig with Jake where I'm going to be thinking maybe I can take an amp, and I need to be able to get that direct to front of house. I don't like to use mics particularly. Generally, this could be a really good solution for that. Take the load box, stick that on top of the amp, doesn't need plugging in. This just needs 9 volts. One other potential use case here, I've got the guitar plugged into my HX Stomp. You see out of here I'm going into the return of this here, and turn off the cabs. Obviously that would probably be the most obvious way to do it, but if I had the internal dip switches set differently, I could use the cabs on here instead. At the moment, because I'm using these TS outputs, the cab won't be heard on the DAW, but that's an option that I could use. Got a doubler which I can still use here. But also this gives me the option to blend in an aux, so this could actually be a really decent way for you to monitor kind of your own modeler on a gig where you then didn't have them interfering with your tones, because oftentimes, like I was on a gig the other day, they weren't able to actually send me the guitar tones without the processing on it, so they'd put in like a low cut and bits and pieces to work with the room, which in my ears sounded awful. They weren't able to turn that post-processing off in my ears. If I had had this, it wouldn't have been a problem. I could have run an aux in, out from the desk, and blended it in, and there's clever dip switches inside again, so you can not have that come back through the front of house stuff. So really clever, really. Doubler sounds really good. Jump to a... Okay, so I just wanted to show you this because when I'm plugged into this XLR, as you could see, it wasn't affecting audio out of these TRS outputs. Now I'm plugged into the XLR, I can turn off or bypass the cab on the HX Stomp and instead use this here. Or a couple of user slots, but I'm really liking the cream back. Handy clipping sensor again. Or I could use that off and the cab. I'm thinking if I was on an in-ear gig, this might actually be the sort of thing I'd be thinking, right, I prefer to kind of trust in this. It would free up some DSP where I'm pretty sure I'd be able to get through most things. The only thing lacking would be the foot switching. And I couldn't use the FX loop here for a complete drive because it would just kill everything, so that wouldn't work for that. But yeah, I'm trying to think through different use cases and come up with something else. Okay, getting a little bit silly with it now, but reasonably. So I could use my HX Stomp here for my kind of post effects. So I can turn the effects loop on or off. So the routing for this is guitar into the ToneX, then ToneX into the input of here. The cab section I've got turned off, and then out the send goes into the HX Stomp, stereo send, stereo return back in. Okay, right, so and also got that doubler there. So I think this is kind of the idea where you're using something like a preamp pedal, like maybe the ToneX. You've got your stereo loop, and this is one of the things they talk about, like being an ideal fly rig. And I can certainly see there's a huge use case for it here. So you could put your drive pedals in front of your ToneX, for example, come out here, and then also this TS would be able to send all of this signal out to a cab on stage, for instance, or into an amp with no power amp and no IR on it. Or you could have it doing that if you turn those dip switches on into an FRFR. Here you can see dual headphone output with level, XLR output level, which is independent, which is really handy. On this side, we've got input gain and power amp mode, so that would be useful if you're using like a preamp in. Then you can use this to send power amp simulation to front of house. Particularly, that would be useful if you were using from the send of an amp with an effects loop, so like a Marshall style or something like that. That could be a really useful way to get good tones to the front of house from the effects loop. Ultimately, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that this can do, but also kind of thinking about the possibilities of how I would use it. So I'm going to need to spend a little bit of time digesting this. I've spent like half an hour this morning kind of running through different ideas with it and different bits and pieces that I could do. I need to actually solidify, you know, how I would really use this in my rig. I think what I'm thinking, first and foremost, is that with tube amps that I've got, that paired with a load box, now this can give me a silent solution for the stage stuff, which doesn't need to involve any menus or anything like that. I can just use this. So I was thinking I'd like to be able to gig these things in certain circumstances. I like to be able to take them out with a load box. I didn't want to take something out like a 2-notes or a universal audio aux box, because I feel like this load actually sounds really decent, and this doesn't attenuate. So I thought, well, when KMA Audio asked me would I do a video with this, I thought actually that could solve that potential problem, and a bunch of other things. A bit of a game-changing pedal. You know, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Another option would be to have this down on the floor as part of a modelling rig, because you've got an aux in and a Bluetooth in as well, incredibly. You can essentially run this as like your mix box, so your front of house is sending your in-ear mix to here, and you can actually blend that aux in into the headphone output, and so you could run essentially control of your own in-ear mix and not have the front of house interfering with your guitar tone. You know, like some desks will have some amount of latency, or some desks will have possibly not the ability to not affect the guitar tone that goes back out to the ears. So if they're running like big low cuts and stuff like that, it can really ruin your gig. This could kind of solve that. Yeah, kind of blown away by how much this little thing is doing. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.